I'm Melody Krieger. I'm the Communications Director with the World Parrot Trust, and I'm so happy today to be hosting the World Parrot Trust's International Women's Day panel. While I couldn't find specific stats, I think most evidence points to the fact that conservation is a male-dominated field, and I think many of you might agree to that. And yet, as International Women's Day approaches and we begin planning for it, it became clear that we actually have a higher number of women than men working at the Trust. And so that's pretty special. The Trust is a great organization. It's been doing amazing things all over the world. And I know I've worked for the Trust for about 7 years, and I've always felt supported in my career here. And it's nice to know that it's not just me, that many of you have experienced that, and that this is just a great organization giving a lot of women a really positive experience and has been for a long time. And in fact, Allison Hales, who couldn't make it today, she's been on our board of trustees for nearly 25 years and has been our chairperson since 2006, as well as Cristiana, who's here with us. She's also a longtime trustee. In lieu of participating, Ali wanted to share a few words that I'll share with you now. So she shares, International Women's Day is a great opportunity to celebrate the achievements of all kinds of women. I'm lucky to be in a world of parrot conservation and welfare where there are so many impressive women, scientists and field workers, curators and keepers, writers, administrators, funders, and individual pet owners, all with incredible commitment and who are making change for good. I'm inspired by their knowledge, their willingness to share it, and the way they continue to take forward vital work to protect threatened species. So not only are thank you, Ali, for sharing your words with us. Not only are women a big part of the trust, employee-wise, but as it turns out, the vast majority of our supporters are also women. Over 70% of our donors are women. So on a day like International Women's Day, it feels right to celebrate all these wonderful women working in conservation and all the incredible people who make this work possible. So I'm excited to spend the next hour chatting with all of you about the important work you do, as well as your stories and any advice you have to share with the next generation of women in conservation. So I'd like to start by inviting you each to introduce yourselves, and we'll go alphabetically, starting with Christiana, and just share who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cristiana Senni, and I'm Italian, and I live in Italy, near Rome. I am. I've been a World Parrot Trust trustee for many years. I started out as a volunteer, and now I'm working mostly on trade issues. I'm a trade specialist, and I've assisted some of our rehabilitation and our local partners, in some of our rehabilitation and release projects.
Thank you. I think alphabetically next up is Joymir.
Yeah. Hello, it's nice meeting you all. My name is Joymer Figueroa Martinez, and I work at Rio Bajo State Forest in Puerto Rico with the Puerto Rican Amazon Recovery Program. Right now, I'm one of the wildlife biologists here at Jose Vivaldi Aviary. And my job basically consists of taking care of the parrots, their health, their well-being, and population. Right now, we're running a project of reproduction with the captive population, but also the wild population, making sure that every year we are increasing the numbers of parrots that we have in the wild. And right now, we have started with our 2025 breeding season, so the whole team is really excited about it.
Wonderful, thank you. Noelia, introduce yourself, please.
Oh. I'm from Argentina, but I currently live in Honduras, where I work as the Yellowknee Amazon coordinator for the World Trust. And as part of this work, I help other projects all over Central America, which are working on the conservation of these species, from rehabilitation and release, just basic research, or nest box programs. And we've recently launched our own nest box program in an island in Honduras called Roatan. So it's a very exciting new stage of the work we're doing here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Last but certainly not least, Chwangi.
Thank you. And thank you also for good to meet everybody here. My name is Tuonge. I'm Zumara Gawa. I work as a lecturer at the Malawi University of Science and Technology. And I'm an ornithologist, conservation biologist. I like to say I'm also an activist by passion. My work is on lovebirds largely. I think I started my journey in parrots, started with working with lovebirds in Luanda National Park, but I've done work in our neighboring countries as well, Mozambique and Zambia. Also got students who are working on other parrots that are in Malawi here. One of our exciting projects, I think, under the Lovebird Research Project with our Parrot Trust is our Nest Box projects, which we have a trial in Luanda National Park that's been, I think this year is going to be 4 years now, and it's really been exciting watching what these boxes can do when placed in the wild. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you all for coming here today. You're all over the world and different time zones, and I really appreciate that we're all able to meet up and you can share your stories with us. So we'll get the conversation started with Chwangi. What inspired you to dedicate your career to parrot conservation and environmental protection?
Yeah, so I think it's a story that I love to share because even for me, I think it's not something that I knew I would be doing. I love biology. I love being in the wild. But it was, I think it was 2005 when I volunteered for a game count in Luanda National Park. And this is, we were going to count mammals. And during this trip, on our transect, we encountered a waterhole that had been poisoned. And at that time, I had just gotten interested in birds. And I knew when I was going to Luanda National Park, the special bird there is the Lillian's lovebird, which they call the Luanda's jewel. And I was really excited, like, this is the one I want to see. This is going to be my tick for this national park. And it was really, for me, very sad and heartbreaking when the first time I saw them was a whole lot of them dead at this pool that had been poisoned. And talking to the rangers there, they told me about how this was an issue in the park in the dry season when water was scarce. People would create these sort of fake, in a way, water holes, and they put poison. Their target is to catch mammals. Of course, they're not looking for the lovebirds, and this is why we found them there. But because once they've done that, the water hole is left there like that, then other species, get hurt, and the lovebirds in the dry season congregate in large numbers and feed. Obviously, they are also looking for water holes where they can drink. And when they hit one of these poisoned water holes, then you are at risk of having hundreds of them die at one go. And so for me, just hearing that story was like, then I asked, why isn't somebody doing something about this? I mean, this is Luanda's jewel, but we have to do something about it. And it was with that I think I came back. I was then working as the ornithologist at the museums of Malawi, and I started writing my little concepts to say, this is an issue I don't think people know about. This is happening in Luanda, and we need to do something about it. And on that journey, we started then to learn also that actually this was a species of parrot that had not been studied in the wild. And most of what was known about it was from captive studies for birds in captivity. But also it was known that the pure breed don't do very well in captivity. So most of the ones that are in captive have been mixed because they do interbreed, as lovebirds did. And yeah, so it was, for me, it was a lot of learning and excitement. I'm like, okay, so here is this bird. This is a huge threat for it if you can have this many birds that are impacted by poisoning. And also, we don't really know much about it in the wild, So again, I, said, okay, and then I feel we should, apart from just targeting and trying to handle the poisoning, we should start learning more about it in the wild. And I think it was then, the work in 2005, we only managed to be able to win the first grant, I think in 2010, just 2009, like 4 years later. And we started slowly, first was just, okay, let's go into the field, let's find out what's happening. with the protected area, with the parks, like how many of these poisoning incidents happen, where do they happen, what is it in the same places every year, and just mapping that kind of information out. And it was really exciting that even the parks, they hadn't actually looked at it in this way, and looking at their reports and where do your poisoning happen, and providing them. I think ours was the first map to give them to say, look, actually all your poisoning seem to happen, in a certain area of the protected area. And maybe if you, protected these places better, we would be able to curb the amount of poisoning that happens. And then, from there, we started saying, okay, so let's understand, how do these birds use this park? Where are they? Where are they breeding? Where are they feeding? So we spent a lot of time following the birds, getting to learn them and where they're doing, sort of which parts of the park are they found, where we have them roosting, where, when exactly they are breeding in the season. So it was a really exciting project. And for me, I think having already, loved that, I wanted to work with nature. I loved doing wildlife, and found something that I could actually contribute to something that wasn't really known, but also help a problem that was a really big issue and nobody had really paid attention to it, and that it was happening in this particular protected area. And being in my home country, the Luanda National Park is just like about 2 hours away from where I stay. So it was, I think, a multiple of things that just really lined up, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been, I think now we're talking about it with Tamara, that, oh, I think, now it's like 15 years with this, working on this work. And every time there's something new that we're finding out, which is really, really exciting. Yeah, so that's been my journey.
That's a beautiful journey, and it's so inspiring. And I can see why you call yourself an activist, because you saw something wrong, and like how like heart-wrenching to see, like, to encounter that, but then to actually make an amazing impact in the work that you're doing. Like that's that's incredible. And you mentioned Tamara, and we had chatted with her last year, and she had some really wonderful things to say about you. So we couldn't neglect talking to you, because you've played such a significant role in mentoring young conservationists. And I'd like you to share, like, why is mentorship so important in conservation, and what impact have you seen from it?
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, it's really, if I love what I do, I want to make sure that there's somebody else or some other people that love this, what I do, as much as I do. So if I'm out of the picture, I know that there are others that will just carry that same candle, forward for much. And so it's, for me, I think from early on, I knew that this is a journey that we have to take people along. As you've said, for Malawi, in my country, even when to say that, I work with birds, people look at you and go, what? It's not something that people think anybody should be doing. We should be conserving the big animals and the elephants. Those are the charismatic, species. That's the things that people relate with. So when you say birds, it took a long time, for people to actually say, oh, birds. So I feel like it's also my responsibility to make sure that, the people that I'm bringing with me that don't look at it like that. I feel, for me, I always tell people, I went into my first national park when I was in university. I had grown up and didn't have that opportunity to go into national park. And so some of these things I got to learn because I went into a national park and I was able to observe the things that are there. And like, if I didn't get a chance, an opportunity, I may not have gotten the interest or learned. So I find that it is a responsibility that I have, that for, if I saw it at that level, I must make sure others see it much earlier so they can develop that interest. They can ask the questions much earlier than I have. And I feel, that part of me it's so important. And I know maybe for many of the students I've had, they have gone on to do other species as well. But that's fine. I think if they can develop a passion for conservation and understand why it's so important that we care, that we want to do so. We not just care, but care and want to do something about it and be able to observe and ask questions, then we're going to build that community of people that even if they don't end up in that sector, they might even end up in a completely different sector. They've encountered it, they've learned, they've had the opportunity. If somebody comes with an idea to them, but I want to do a conservation project in this, and they're a big CEO in some company, they will relate because they've been in a park, they've been in the forest, they've sat in that little tent and observing with your binoculars, for hours, writing what is the bird doing now, what is the bird doing now, and that is an experience that they won't get anywhere. And if I can have that opportunity to give them that experience, excellent. And if I have even better, if I can give that experience and they feel this is also what I want to do, then even better for me. And I think it's really something I always say I cannot do without. I never have a research project. People always say, I have in there research assistants. And so that because this is the way that we bring these young people in and introduce them to this field that we love so much.
Oh, it's beautiful. And it really is like a testament to the ripple effect. You saw something wrong and now you're inspiring others and it just goes outward. And that's really wonderful. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do and for sharing that. I'm going to chat with Cristiana next. So Cristiana, you started volunteering with the Trust 25 years ago to translate our PsittaScene magazine, which we send out to our members. And at the time, you said you didn't have much knowledge about parrots at all, and now you are a trade specialist. The global bird trade is a huge threat to wild parrot populations. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you think people have about the parrot trade?
Well, for some people, well, quite a few actually feel that as long as the trade is legal, then the trade is okay, and that allowing trapping generates income that also protects the environment of the birds. But in reality, and besides the fact that it's a cruel and destructive practice, for almost all parrot species, there haven't been any scientific survey showing that the trapping levels are sustainable. While the income mostly goes to middlemen, exporters, sometimes to government officials, and not for the conservation of the environment of the birds. So that I think that's the main misconception, really.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see that people think, well, it's legal, so it must be okay, or just they don't realize. Like I know we hear stories about birds that are mislabeled and just to get around things that are in transit, and there's a lot of sneaky things going on, and just because some things are legal doesn't make it right. There's could be said for a lot of things.
Right.
Um, So what progress in the time that you've been doing this, like what progress have you seen that's been made in reducing trade, and what do you feel still needs to be done?
Well, the regulation of the wild bird trade in the 70s started through CITES, has helped a lot limiting the threats to parrots and other birds by reducing their trade. The European then, the US import ban and much later the European import ban made a massive difference in reducing the trade, including the illegal trade. But there's much to be done. We still have enforcement issues, loopholes in the regulation that allow to bypass them and that are exploited by the illegal trade. Countries that do not fully implement the regulation for either lack of capacity or lack of resources or corruption. Now, if we think about global trade in general, it's something that is really almost impossible to regulate effectively. In the case of parrots, even if that was possible, our position has always been that wild parrots, as all other birds, should be left in the wild. So our trade work revolves around analyzing the official data, identifying and raising issues that might have gone unnoticed, because it's a really very complex machine. So there are things that go unnoticed. And investigating the illegal trade as much as we can, and essentially doing intelligence work and reporting it to local enforcement agencies and the CITES Secretariat. So we do what we can to reduce the illegal trade, but also to assist in having a better regulated legal trade until the day will come that hopefully no trade in wild bird will happen, will be allowed.
Love to see that someday. And keep up the great work on that. Noelia had a question for you, so I'm just going to pass it over to her to ask one more question about the work you do.
Hey, Cristiana. So I was wondering, there are many often cases, especially here in Latin America, where people like see on the side of a road someone selling a parrot that's like in a really awful condition in an awful cage. And then people buy those birds because they feel pity and they either want to release them or like have them in better conditions in their house. And they think they're helping that bird, but they're actually paying money. So they're like kind of feeding the system, right? So I was wondering if you have any advice for those people that see those situations, like what's a better way to help a bird that you see that's being traded out in the street, for example?
Well, it's as hard as it can be, as it is actually, not buying them helps the species. That's the first thing. Do not fuel the illegal trade. And the other thing that can be done is, depending on, the abilities, the time, try to educate locally about the parrots, about not fueling the illegal trade, about the importance of protecting them. In other words, trying to reduce the demand locally. It's not easy, but a little bit at a time it can be done. And any positive result helps. If you speak to a school, if you speak to young people speak to their parents, and it just helps spread information that they may not be aware of, they're likely not aware of. If you live in a country where you used to see wild parrots around, you just maybe don't think about the fact that the species are under threat. And so this would be my advice.
Thanks. That's good advice for sure.
Mm-hmm. Echoing that, that's great advice. Yeah, it's sometimes people think they're doing something good by helping, but you're just feeding the problem because then they see that there's a demand for it and it just continues.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And now we'll throw the questions over to Noelia. It'll be so Noelia, you're currently working on a nest box pilot project where you're encouraging the local community to take on an active role in protecting the yellow-naped Amazon. Can you share a bit about what that project entails and what are some of the bigger challenges that you faced in community-based conservation and how do you overcome them?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so the project, so first, the yellow-naped Amazon is a critically endangered species all over Central America. And in where I work in Honduras, in the Bay Islands, there's like a specific subspecies that's endemic to these islands. But they have always been traded a lot because as they are like very good speakers, since the Spaniards arrived here, there's always been like trade from the islands outwards. And the numbers have really decreased because of that, but also because of hurricane actions and habitat destructions. So when I talk with local people, they mentioned that maybe 50 years ago, they saw like these huge like flocks of parrots flying around, not only the yellowknave, but other two species that used to be like abundant in the island, but now they don't see them anymore. And even though like numbers are starting to like grow a little bit, before that, like, yeah, there was like the big hurricane called Mitch that led to like a really big decrease in the number of parrots. But then they couldn't like jump back because of the pet trade, like they were taking all the chicks. So that like slowed down the process. So slowly they are starting to be like larger numbers than a couple of years ago. But what's happening now in Roatan, there's a lot of touristic development because it's growing in that aspect. So there's a lot of increasing deforestation, and that's like leaving the parrots once again, like once without the habitat where to nest, right? So what we're trying to do is, it has like two objectives, the project we started. One of them is increase the number of nesting sites for the parrots, so to compensate for all these trees that are being currently felled, but also to bring like the yellow-naped Amazon into the light, because as I mentioned, this species is endemic from here. Like that means you can't find this subspecies in particular anywhere else. And still when a tourist arrives to Roatan, you see pictures of the reefs, of the turtles, of the water, but you don't see no pictures of a yellow-naped Amazon. No one knows how important they are, how special it is to see one of these parrots. So part of the idea of this project too is like, it's bring it to life and like make people realize like, oh wow, we have a special parrot here. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And like currently a partner of us, which is called the Green Island Channel Challenge in Guanaja, is currently doing a yellow-naped Amazon networks project, which is very successful. They have been doing it for like a couple of years. So based on that success, it was like, okay, let's try to replicate that in Roatan. But let's do it small scale. Let's see if there's interest of people, wanting to participate. So let's do a pilot project. Maybe we're going to put maybe 10, 15 nests, hopefully. So we shared a flyer around, was very low key. We didn't make like a lot of publicity about it. And then we started to get messages and messages and messages. And suddenly I was contacted by like, I think I'm reaching to 80 people because I'm still getting messages. We started this in November. And suddenly, like, yeah, their interest was there. So we had to go from like, okay, we're just gonna build 10 nests and install them to like build more and more to like supply this demand, because we want them to, they want to let these people down because they're actually interested in conservation, right? So by now, I think we're gonna end up with 43 nests in total. So it's just been like so exciting to see like all this huge response. And our idea is to work with the local people. So we put the nests in their backyards, and we try to locate people who are conservation minded. Okay, so to make sure that they're gonna take care of these nests, they're not gonna let people approach them or like poach them, which is like the main danger there. So they keep a look on the nests and let us know if they see activity, and then we will go and monitor if there's eggs, chicks, and like help the chicks as needed. So that's your question of like what's a challenge working in such a community-based project. I think like one of the first challenges, especially when you're just starting, is just identifying people who you can trust, right? Like who are actually conservation minded, because like the main problem for the yellowknave is getting poached from the nest, and you're giving nests. So like, who are you giving those nests to, right? And at the beginning, that's why we made it also so small scale, and just like getting, local conservation agencies got in touch with neighbors that they knew that they trusted, and we had those neighbors share the flyer with the people they trusted. So we wanted to be like mouth to mouth between people who like are conservation minded, right? So that's like a challenge at the beginning. Now, like it grew like now I know more people from Rot, and now I got in touch with like different networks of people who, maybe there's like a leader in each neighborhood, like, oh, I'm gonna like talk with all my neighbors and we can organize when you can come put the nets. So like it became like this, like a network of different sub-networks of people interested in conservation, which was great. And now like I can work on that to like maybe develop future conservation projects based on that. So yeah, that's been very exciting. But like when we are already on the topic of like what's a challenge working with communities, which is not happening here because it's these boxes, right? But what happens in other projects I work with, especially when you release birds into the wild that are rehabilitated and have a tendency to go close to humans. And then they arrive to houses and people want to feed them, right? And they are like very happy and they want to help these animals and they have like all the best intentions, to help these birds because they're hungry and you love them. And they are not a danger to them, but they don't realize that they are endangering them, but making them trust people. And then if those same birds go to someone with bad intentions, they are gonna get captured. So that's a challenge, like balancing that and like working with these people who are like clearly love the animals and have this goodwill, but you have to channel that goodwill into the need well, not go there and say like, stop doing this, because you don't want to like cut their love for nature, and they're also like probably not gonna pay attention, right? But okay, let's go and say like, okay, if you want to do it in this way that doesn't endanger the bird, like put the feeders up, feed them something that doesn't come from your dish plate, So there are like so many ways that you can like help people channel those good intentions in the best way possible without endangering the birds.
Right. It's so interesting that some of the biggest challenges have to do with an abundance of love and trust, like people like, I mean, how amazing like that this project's been so successful with such an influx of people that want to get involved. But then making sure you can trust them, like you say, and then also the people that just love them so much and want to feed them, but it's like, oh, you can't do that. Like it's that's an interesting problem to have, but also it's wonderful that you're getting so much support, and it's been really exciting um, to see that. Like I know you had those posters out, and now you're just like, oh, what do we do with all these people? Like more nest boxes than we had planned. Like it's amazing. I'm excited for you guys.
Yeah, it's been a challenge really, but like rushing everything up and like suddenly like trying to keep up with everyone, just like, oh no, I didn't answer this person, they are waiting for me. And but it's good, it's a good problem to have, I think.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely a good problem. I know I'd be signing up for a nest box. Who wouldn't? It'd be amazing. Yeah, very excited for you. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And now we'll move the floor over to Jameer. So the Puerto Rican Amazon has faced major threats from habitat destruction to hurricanes. What have been some of the most successful conservation efforts for this species? And how important would you say is collaboration between scientists, governments, communities in saving endangered species in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest efforts that we have done throughout the years is that now we don't have just only one aviary. We have 3 aviaries around the island that we love and support. So we're hoping that in the future we have more than 3. But right now, with what we have, it is enough. Why is it's just important for hurricanes and stuff? It is because hurricanes are very unstable, so they don't always hit the island the same in different areas. So we probably, if for example, if we get like a huge hurricane and it hits one of the aviaries and there's a lot of losses, the other 2 aviaries are like able to help in any way possible. That could be food, that could be material, that could be workers, but most importantly, that could also be parrots. We don't only do this exchange of parrots only in hurricane season. We also do it throughout the year, just because it is a healthy way to have genetic variation. Another big effort is that every aviary now has a hurricane room. Of course, this only works for the parrots in captivity, and we just provide a safe shelter for them to just pass the hurricane. With that, we prevent them from dying, getting hurt, or escaping that will eventually lead to dying if they get caught in the hurricane. Um, and another big effort that we do, and this is for the wild population that we have right now, is just that we also build artificial nests. Puerto Rico was under huge deforestation in the past, and we're still trying to recover from that. And because of deforestation, we lost all the natural cavities that the parrots had to lay eggs. So we needed to think quickly about what we were going to do. So that's why we started to build the artificial nest. With the artificial nest, they have a safe place to lay their eggs, and it's also controlled. What do I mean with control? With the help of a lot of climbers, we're able to check on the nest, and with that, we decrease the mortality of the chicks, and also we increase the population in the wild. And I think it's very important for the government, the scientists, and the community to be together as a union, because I think that is the only way that we can eventually save the Puerto Rican parrots. I start with scientists. Like, we take on the heavy work. We work face to face with the parrots every day, with eggs, with the chicks. We are running around the forest. We are taking on data. So we see firsthand all the works that has been done for the Puerto Rican parrot. The community, I see the community as allies. They're always on the lookout to, make sure that all the laws are being taken care of. And also the community is where you can find future biologists, future conservationists. So for me, the community is very, very important. And as for the government, they provide resources, they provide propaganda, they'll also provide the laws that protects the parrots, because the Puerto Rican parrots has a lot of protection. And also, I think our projects is a little bit different from other projects because we do work hand in hand with the government, with the Department of Natural Resources. We work with Fish and Wildlife and Forest Service. And also, we are creating new partnerships with nonprofit organizations like the World Parrot Trust. So I think a combination of everything and everyone is what's saving the Puerto Rican parrot today.
Absolutely. Everybody has their part. And my only experience ever in the field, I got to go to Puerto Rico a few years ago, and the work that you do is not like you do the heavy lifting, climbing the trees, trying not to drop the eggs. Like, I think that was one of the things, don't drop the babies. Like, some of those
Don't
paths
drop it.
tricky to get through at the best of times, and picky leaves and everything, and then to carry little eggs and protect the next generation, next flock. Um, yeah, it's a lot of really hard hands-on work and rewarding work to see the populations grow. I know they've had a couple banner years for chicks recently. I think you've had a few good years that I've heard about.
Yes, yes, yes. Last year we had 26 active nests. We have in the forest we have 45, but last year we have 26 active, which is like a new record because not all of them are active, even though they're open. So we're hopefully in the future they can all be active. But as of today, last year we broke the record for most active nests.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I'm so glad to hear it, and that the project's moving along. And yeah, I know for myself, it was one of the most special experiences because I've never seen parrots in the wild before. And then to see, two Puerto Rican Amazons breeding, we were just like, the other people I was with, they just start cheering them on. And it's like, oh, this is, that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's happening. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I will throw it. We have a few like kind of quick wrap up questions for each of you to speak to. So we'll start with Cristiana on what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to make a difference in conservation?
My advice would be to, first of all, learn as much as possible from trustworthy sources, scientifically based sources about projects that are of interest to you, and to understand what you can do to support them, depending on what are your capacities, what is your time, or your financial resources, what you know how to do best, and then identify a way to support a project. Conservation in general, it's a massive, huge field, also if limited only to parrots. So I think that focusing on a project may be the best way, and just to gain, more thorough knowledge of what goes on. And if you're still interested, then you can, learn about other projects too. But I think that in order to make a difference, one needs to learn really what are the challenges, what are the risk, what is being done for certain species, and that would be my advice.
That's great advice and important advice, especially these days when there's so much misinformation out there, and you really have to consider the source and who is this coming from, and do they have the best interest at heart, and is it scientifically backed? And yeah, getting informed is so important. Thank you. You could change one thing about the way conservation is done today, what would it be?
Okay, I think one thing I think should change would be like there's a need to like bridge that gap that exists between like people and nature. I think like nowadays we see like conservation of nature as something that happens outside, and like nature is like this pristine area with like the forest and animals, and you go there and visit and you're in nature, and then you go back to human life, and that's just separate. Like that's nature, and then we humans live in this other place, and we humans are just awful people that our only relation with nature is destroyed, right? That's kind of like the main thing right now, and that's how it sells. And that's like a downer message that doesn't get people inspired to do something, because like what can I really do if like first we are like these awful species but we can only destroy things, and also like nature is there and I'm here, so like yeah, I guess that's so sad. But I think like if we make people understand that like the humans, we are part of nature, and like our surroundings, we are part of whatever ecosystem we are, even if it's urban, semi-urban, or like we are like in the forest or in the fields, and like the animals are part of our neighbors as well, and if you get that in your mind, people might start to understand that if you appreciate that animal that's visiting your house, then you will want to continue visiting your house maybe. And like if you have to make a change in your garden, let's say like there's a tree where like parrots come to feed, and like you like those parrots, but then you have to build a shed, like are you gonna chop that? And they're like, okay. Or you're gonna like build it by the tree and leave the tree there, and then you continue seeing these parrots. And that's conservation you're doing. And you're not in like a nature reserve, just like your own backyard can be like a source of conservation, because maybe that's like a main food source for the parrots. And maybe like you live by a forest, and like that's where the parrots come to feed, and then you want to protect your tree. But then again, maybe someone wants to cut the forest and you want them to continue coming to your tree. So hey, let's talk with the government and like prevent this happening. So like if people are more aware that they are in nature wherever you are, and you can influence that and help the animals that are still around after we humans have intervened, then that would lead to like another type of conservation that is like helping survive the ones that are still around.
Absolutely. I think that's something so many people lose sight of, that they become disconnected from nature. And we are a part of nature. And like you say, even in your own backyard, like you can make a difference in how your reciprocal relationship or your connection to the environment around you and how you support it, or like, contacting lawmakers and lobbying for important change. Thank you. That's a great answer. And we'll go Twangi. Next, same question for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think for me, one of the things that I would change, I'd say it's in terms of how we look at things, or even look at how we prioritize um, um, what should be considered, or what should be given resources for funding. And sometimes that, as much as it's important that we look at the things that are really endangered, the critically endangered, but we shouldn't forget the things that are not, and also shouldn't really think about forward. I talk about this because when we wanted to do the next post project in Leonde, we struggled to get the permits because they said, "Oh, there's no nest problem in Leonde National Park. We've got all these trees. Why do you want to do this here?" But I've been to Zambia and I've been to Mozambique, where I've seen that these mopane trees where the lovebirds nest, they are being cleared legally, harvested for so long. And because nobody's thinking about the lovebirds, and I'm thinking, oh, goodness, at some point this is going to go. So yes, it's not a problem in my country, but I would like to know, would these lovebirds use these nests? Because when it is a problem, and now we live in a global world, we can't just think about a little bit. But we struggled to get the permits for it because everybody was thinking, oh, it's not, it's not an emergency now, but we need to really think. And especially now when we get all these um, disasters that come out of nowhere. We have the cyclones, we have fires, hurricanes. I say that will cause damages that you cannot even think about. And we cannot sit and not think about those things. We must do our conservation and think about how our world is changing and what could happen to even our most common species, and where there isn't a problem. So for me, I really like, say, if even for supporters, and we were thankful because I think World Parrot Trust is the one that came in and said, yes, this is something that needs to be done. Yes, we're going to do it in Malawi because, I'm here, I can't do it in another country. And things like that. So we need a lot more support for those kind of things, people who are willing to take on those things that are not, it's not so obvious that it's needed, but we can show that, this is something we might, if we understand it now and we understand it better, when it does come in the future, or we might end up using it for something different, but it's something just as important as the things that need action right away. And for me, I think that's something that we really need to do. I think I've seen a little bit of that happening, but there's a lot more, and I think a lot more support need to be provided for that kind of work that is really looking at the common things sometimes, or what might happen or what could be that may not necessarily has happened already. Yeah, so I think that's one thing that I would say, we need to do differently.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. We live in such a reactive state to things that a lot of people, like, it's later guys' problem. It's to be proactive and prevent things, like, what's the saying? An ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. Like, get ahead of things before they become an issue and look to the future. That's great advice. Like, don't wait until it becomes a problem. Let's just start protecting what we can now and making the efforts. That's great. Thank you. And we'll pass that same question over to Jomer.
Yes, one of the things that I would change about conservation is that we need bigger community outreach programs. There's been a lot of misinformation between scientists and citizens about endemic species or endangered species, invasive species, or how to act accordingly to each of them. So I would love to show the people that we all as a collective can be part of the protection of the Puerto Rican parrot. They can be really helpful in that department. I want them to feel that they're included, that I want them to know that what's happening with our parrots. I don't like to think that the parrots only belongs to the scientists or the government. I want every Puerto Rican to feel like they have a sense of belonging. Our Amazon has been a symbol of national identity for years, and I would love to keep it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was that's what I was hearing when I was in Puerto Rico too. Like to share, like save your, native species. That
Mm-hmm.
it's the Puerto Rican Amazon, and it belongs to everyone. Like you say, not just the
Yeah.
scientists and government, and that's where that community involvement comes from, and that, you know, kind of taking pride in protecting this bird. Um, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much today for participating and sharing your experiences and encouraging other conservationists and people alike on how they can make a difference in their own backyards or in their countries. And also thank you to everyone for watching. And if you'd like to ask any further questions to any of our panelists, we'll make that information available alongside this video. So you can email us and we'll be sure to direct your questions to the appropriate people. Or if you want to make a gift to any of these projects, we'll have that information available to you as well, so you can support all this amazing work that's happening. So thanks again, everyone, for your support and for empowering the women who are making a difference for parrots and our planet. Thanks.